Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Michael Alago, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love and poetry. He's had an amazing life in music, going back to the late 70s. Famous for many reasons, being part of the Ritz venue club in New York in the very early 80s, and then going on to work with several record labels, signing people like Metallica, working with Tracy Chapman, Cyndi Lauper. Nina Simone has a book that's out titled I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Signing Metallica, Beating Death, and that was released in 2020. And there is a film as well that you could watch, which is titled Who the Fuck Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago. Anyway, that was a rather big build-up, so let's get to the interview. Just to say that we go here, there and everywhere with this, and there are moments with yes, you'll get it, but it's a fantastic interview, so you'll love it. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Michael, it's over to you.
Oh, that's funny you asked, because in my memoir, I think the first sentence is, I came out of the womb loving music. Yeah. And as a youngster, preteen, early teens, no, preteens, I would listen to AM radio. I had a little, very small transistor radio, and I listened to everything, because back then, my brain just stopped working, but it happens. This is why I don't drink and drug anymore. We'll backtrack just for a moment.
Yes.
When I was young, preteen, I listened to AM radio, WABC. AM. And back then, radio was not heavily not profiled, but maybe it was profiled? Programmed. Oh boy. See, the brain is not working. So back then, radio songs were not heavily programmed. So you would hear everything from Grand Funk Railroad to Aretha Franklin to Todd Rundgren, and many more. And that's all AM radio. And I would get 45 records, and I would sit on my stoop with my Panasonic record player all by myself. I was kind of a loner, but I don't want to start sounding like Pee Wee Herman.
No.
I was just a loner. And I would just listen to records all day. And soon after that, I started hearing about artists like Todd Rundgren and Alice Cooper and Roxy Music and David Bowie. And they became my early favorites until mid to late 70s, when, as an underage teenager, I would go to CBGB, which became my home away from home. And how I started to know about what was going on at CBGB was because every Wednesday, there was a newspaper called The Village Voice. And there was everything in The Village Voice, from real estate to all the porn theaters in Times Square, my favorite, and all the music listings for all the, the clubs and the larger music venues in the back section. So I always thought, like, when I started looking at Hilly Crystal, the owner of CBGB's listing, it was a full page listing, not a full page, but it went, it was narrow, but top to bottom. I thought things like Deaf School and the Dead Boys and Suicide and Cherry Vanilla and Eddie and the Hot Rods and Chelsea. There was like a little bit of a British invasion at some point.
Yes.
That Hilly brought in. I remember kidnapping Gene October one night, and I brought him home with me. Don't ask. It's all a blur. But yes, early on, those are my early days of music, from the AM radio to Brian Ferry and David Bowie to the beginnings of punk rock, because I basically lived at CBGB. Back then, I could have been 15 or 16. I looked like I was 12 and a half. And, none of us were getting carded back then. It was such a different time. And even though they called New York fear city. I had no fear whatsoever. I would get my little knapsack with my Minolta camera, and I would take the B train from Brooklyn, excuse me, to I don't know, Broadway Lafayette, and I would get off, and I would see down the block was it was like a T. So it's Bowery and Bleecker, and I ran right into CBGB. And when I had
Nice.
enough of that, because it was getting late, I would walk up Bowery to Park Avenue South, and I would go to Max's Kansas City. Those were really all my very early days of going out to hear music.
Yes, absolutely. And were your parents, I mean, at that point, were they an influence on your life in a positive way or not so positive way?
As an adult, I was very surprised that my mom, it was just me, my mom, and my sister Cheryl, that she let me go out during the week at a very young age. I always did well at school. I went to an all boys Catholic high school for the first 2 years. The ninth and 10th grade, and then I went to some experimental high school for the 11th and 12th grade. And but that's not what you asked me. Oh, my mom. Yeah,
Yes.
I still, to this day, and God rest her soul, I have no idea why she allowed me to go out all the time. All the time. I only remember this because recently I was going through an archival box, and I saw an opening night Bette Midler ticket that was like about this big. I guess they only cut off the little bit on the side, but you got to keep the larger portion of the ticket, and it was intact. And I saw that it was, I don't know, I think it was like 1978. It was at the Copacabana on a Thursday, and it started at 11:30 p.m.
Blimey, that was
Yeah.
amazing.
It's crazy. So like I said, I have no idea why my mom allowed me to go out every night of the week if I wanted to. She had trust in me, and like I said, I had no fear. I had no fear.
Blimey. And what about your dad? Did he not hang about very much when
No,
you were born?
my dad left my mom and my mom and my sister when I was 12. My sister was 8. He didn't really go far, but once a parent leaves, you become like, just I became much closer to my mom and sister, and he was there, and unfortunately, like we never really got close until the very end of his life. And that was probably like 1992. And, that's just sometimes the way it is.
Yes, absolutely. God, that's always much. And with that kind of musical moment, you obviously had the 70s was very much your decade. There was other kind of moments, weren't there? There was like heavy metal had appeared, the kind of sensitive singer-songwriter James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, Carole King. There was prog rock, which came a bit of heavy, the sort of, I suppose you had the Black Sabbath, then Deep Purple, and then the rock kind of guys. So were you sort of kind of dipping your toe into different other things other than that kind of glam period of Roxy and
Sure.
Alice Cooper?
I definitely I was a lover of all kinds of music. My ears really were open to, like you mentioned, I remember getting the first few James Taylor records. I loved Joni Mitchell. Oh, I loved Laura Nero.
Right.
Carole King. So yes, in early 70s, I remember getting a lot of singer-songwriter records, but just my ears were attuned to a lot of different things. And then you start growing, and one starts going out, like I mentioned. And so once I got to CBGB, it wasn't about singer-songwriters anymore. It was about Stiv Bators and the Dead Boys, and all those type of artists. And I don't know, I just loved every moment of it.
Yes. And would you, because I know I did an interview with, was it JJ French from Twisted Sister, who was kind of part of that New York scene. And it was kind of interesting because they spent the whole decade, didn't they, the 70s, going nowhere fast, but playing a lot of gigs in New York. Were you
Totally.
aware of them as well? And that kind of...
I was aware of them. I don't know if they really interested me at some point, probably in the early 80s, I started listening to heavy metal more. And if I'm going to fast forward just a moment, when I got to Elektra Records, which was a part of Time Warner, I started doing A&R there in 1983. And the second band that I signed was Metallica. And then I signed Flotsam and Jetsam. And then I signed Metal Church. And then I executive produced Dokken. And I was like this crazy young metal kid going out to hear all these metal shows. Never mind that when I lived in Brooklyn still, down the block, under the elevated train about 7 blocks, was a nightclub called L'Amour. Well, all of us young people loved going to L'Amour because we got to see a lot of artists before they got signed to major labels. And I remember seeing Metallica there. I loved Wendy O. Williams. I loved the Plasmatics. I got to see the Plasmatics there. It was like all different types of artists that played at L'Amour as well. So I had no real interests other than music back then. So I was open to everything.
Yes, my God, that's amazing. But because I did an interview about a month or so ago with a guy called himself Man Parrish, who was, Mr. Clubman at one stage. And yes, he obviously went the disco dance route, actually, in Studio
Yes.
54. Did that kind of come into your orbit at all, that kind of world?
A brief moment. I could probably count the number of times I went to Studio 54, maybe 2 or 3 times. Not really my interest. It was more, rock and roll.
It was rock and roll.
And there were enough venues back then to go to, whether you're in Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens. There was always something going on with artists who were signed and unsigned, who were rock and roll and not really disco.
Yes, not rock and roll and not disco at all. When did you become kind of aware of people like Patti Smith and Robert Mapplethorpe and that kind of scene with Andy Warhol?
Sure.
And was that kind of something that you started to sort of gravitate towards? Because there was a guy called Lee Black Childers, who I don't know if you've come across.
Bless his heart. Listen, I've come across almost everyone. But yes, thank you for asking. Lee Black Childers was a total sweetheart. He took extraordinary pictures. I remember hearing about Patti Smith in 1975. And because I was always so bold and brazen, and I would make phone calls. And when I was that young, I wasn't about like, don't you know who I am? It was just about like I remember specifically one of my first phone calls to a management company. I called a company called the Wartoke Concerned. It was run by Jane Friedman, who managed Patti Smith. And she had an assistant named Jeffy. And I called and I said, hi, my name is Michael Alago. I live in Brooklyn and I love Patti Smith. And I'm not able to get a hold of anybody at Arista Records. So could you please send me a press kit? Well, they sent me a press kit. It had 2 8x10 black and white 8x10 glossies and a bio. And when you and the what am I trying to say? And the
press release, the fold out sleeves.
Okay, the folder. The cover was the cover of Horses. You opened it up, and on the left side were the 8x10s, and on the right side was the bio, the press release, and all that kind of stuff. So at an early age, I was very forward about calling people and getting things that I wanted. Also in the very early days, or in the mid 70s, it's when Seymour Stein started signing artists to his label, Sire Records, which also a part of Time Warner. So you got to hear the Ramones.
Yes.
Talking Heads.
I guess Blondie would have slipped in there as well, wouldn't they?
Blondie was on a label called Private Stock back then. Patti was on Arista. There was a whole host of those younger artists that were getting signed. And those are the ones that the couple that we just mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. And did Danny Fields come into your orbit at this stage? Because Danny, the classic Danny Fields with the brilliant film as well.
Yeah.
Yes, quite the character, and also worked with Jim Morrison or Iggy Pop, and then obviously the Ramones. So did he slip into your network?
He certainly did. And I just texted with him yesterday. I love Danny Fields. He is very near and dear to me. He's in his upper 80s right now, and but we never stopped being friends. I met him in around 1980 when I got my first job in the music business at the Ritz in the East Village. The Ritz is now known as Webster Hall, but back then it was a new music venue that had an extraordinary 30-foot screen that all the record companies would send their artists' videos to us. And of course, they wanted them to get played. At some point in between 80 and 83, because I only was at the Ritz for 3 years, um, Danny became our publicist there.
Right.
But
That's
prior to that, and I'm sure you know this, Danny. It's funny that later in life, I worked at Elektra in the 60s. Danny worked at Elektra. He was the publicist for Jim Morrison. At some point he was going to Detroit to see the MC5 as per Jack Holzman, the president of the company. So he goes and he sees them, and Wayne Kramer talks to Danny about their little brother's band called Iggy and the Stooges. Well, Danny lost his mind over Iggy Pop. And so when he called Holzman from Detroit, he said, there's another band here called Iggy and the Stooges, and he wanted to sign them as well. So he wound up coming back to New York, signing two artists, those two iconic bands, MC5 and the Stooges. And
yes.
yes, I love Danny. He managed the Ramones with the late great Linda Stein, rest her soul, and he's quite the character. I think he's an incredible photographer as well. He has put out many books on the Ramones, photo books on the Ramones, and he's a character, and
Yes,
he has a brilliant mind.
absolutely. So when you got the big gig, the big break in sort of 80 to 83 at the Ritz, I mean, this was kind of interesting time of music. But in the UK, I mean, for us, I was quite young at the time, but 79, Margaret Thatcher gets in. I guess you would have had Reagan, and then from there we had the Falkland War, which was quite a big thing. We had the miners' strike. There was a lot of
Oh,
kind of
yes.
poverty and strife at that time. There was Greenham Common. There was this whole threat of nuclear war, and
There was no garbage being picked up for
there
weeks,
was no garbage. I mean, there
but
was a
that was
lot of.
probably a little earlier in the 70s, probably.
Yes, there was
Yeah.
that, but that
Anyway,
would be we had a lot of strikes in the 70s, but musically things started to change a lot. There was obviously that punk period, then post-punk with some kind of interesting bands, and then from there, the early 80s there was a goth scene, there was the New Romantic, the Blitz Kids with all those kind of bands happening. There was obviously a bit of a rockabilly thing going on with the Rockettes, and then the Stray Cats, and then the Cramps and people like that. So how were you kind of navigating this yourself musically at this point? Because when you were at the Ritz, were you working as in what capacity was this?
sure. I got a job at the Ritz when I was 19 years old. I was going to the School of Visual Arts, and I worked in the East Village at a pharmacy at a municipal workers union. I took lunch one day, and I'm walking down East 11th Street. I see a beautiful Art Deco building. And I thought, oh my God, this is gorgeous. And there was just a little piece of, 8 by 10 white paper on the door. And it said, video club opening, resumes wanted. And I thought, video club opening, resumes wanted. I'm going inside. So I went inside. I was in awe of how beautiful this Art Deco building was. And there was a man in the balcony. And I likened Jerry Brandt to the Wizard of Oz. And he looked at me and he said, "Kid, can I help you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want a job." And he looked at me and he said, do you have a resume? And I said, no, I go to the School of Visual Arts. I have no resume. Well, he laughed in my face and he said, come upstairs. So I went up to his office on the second floor of the Ritz, and we started talking about music. We started talking about all kinds of music, from the Great American Songbook from the 40s, 50s, because I really was aware of all that stuff as well, to what was going on in the New York underground, punk rock, all the artists that were now getting signed to major labels. And I just listened to everything. And I think I kind of wowed Jerry with my knowledge of music. And little did I know that Jerry Brandt, my mentor, God rest his soul, everybody's dead now these days. Jerry, back in the day, he worked in the mailroom with David Geffen at the William Morris Agency. At a very early age, Jerry was an agent there, and he worked with everyone from Sam Cooke to Muhammad Ali. He helped bring the Rolling Stones to the United States. Later on, he discovered Carly Simon and the Voices of East Harlem. I mean, and in the 70s, he had the Electric Circus nightclub on St. Mark's Place in the East Village. So if I would have known all of that while he was interviewing me and talking to me, I probably would have just froze, lost my mind, not know what to say. So he said, you know, I like you, kid. I'm going to give you a job. You're going to open my mail. You're going to get my lunch, and you're going to answer my phone. And I thought to myself, not out loud, oh my God, I'm in the music business.
Yes.
19-year-old kid. But you know what? I was in the music business, and I was a sponge. And I listened to everything Jerry had to say to the booking agents on the telephone. I don't know, the Ritz was like a 1,600 seat venue or standing room venue. And I just listened. I wanted to know, what do you pay an artist to that would potentially fill up that room? Where are the break points when you pay somebody? I mean, it was a whole host of just learning how to book a room that's
Yes.
that size.
The
And
mechanics.
the mechanics, I love that. That's a good one. And we had everyone there from Prince to Kid Creole and the Coconuts, 5 nights of the return of Tina Turner. So we had to fill up the room almost every night. And on a Monday and Tuesday night, I think it was like a $2.50 or $3 night, because it was just a video night, or it
Yes.
was local talent night, But it was an extraordinary learning experience for me.
Yes.
Those 3 years.
Well, it's also quite an interesting transition, that period, isn't it? The early 80s, musically, things are really happening. And one thing I noticed, I don't know if it's not 100% watertight theory, but I noticed that some artists who can be big in one decade or on the zeitgeist, their work is amazing. They sometimes can struggle when they slip into the next decade and they're not on the scene at all. And some of their work is a bit like, it's not great, matey. I just suppose, people like Tina Turner were obviously coming back from a bit of obscurity, wasn't she, at that stage?
Yes, I mean, she had made those early records with Ike Turner, her husband. And then, there was mayhem between the two of them. And then she just kind of disappeared. And there was an agent or manager named, I believe his name was Roger Ames. And he looked her up and he helped bring her back from the brink, and got her signed to Capitol Records. And she started making these very commercial records like Private Dancer and What's Love Got to Do with It. And at that point in time, Roger and Jerry Brandt were friends. And he said, we want to bring Tina back. And we want to do 5 nights at the Ritz. And we want you to help us. Well, Jerry loved Tina, and we brought her back. And every night there was somebody there: David Bowie, Keith Richards. I mean, it was a whole who's who every night to come and see Tina Turner. It was marvelous. It really was.
Because I
Marvelous.
guess 83, that would have been when David Bowie was doing Let's Dance, and obviously, yes, he was kind of he was having a bit of a transition period from his 70s into the 80s.
Sure. Well,
it started so well, and then
well, but with certain artists, say like a David Bowie, there was always something going on with him, and whether that was Ziggy Stardust, or then you moving forward a little, like in the early '80s, and there's like Let's Dance. He always was, as they say, a chameleon, and I guess, well, David and Patty and Nina Simone, I guess, are like my favorite artists. But yeah, some artists, just don't survive that transition. That if you were big, if you were wildly popular in the '80s, and here we are in the '90s, one sometimes doesn't know what to do with themselves. So there's certain artists were about a period of time, and that's it.
yes,
It happens.
it does. I think with someone like Bowie, or quite a few, I think they go from sort of leading or going with what they feel, and that happens to be good, and then they sort of seem to have this bit of doubt and sort of go, oh, what producer should I have? What's kind of hip and happening? Oh, I'll get that person, I'll get these musicians. And it's in a sort of, in a subtle way, they, a very slight way, they seem to be following a trend, and when their work come out, it's like, oh dear, this does sound a bit like, yes, not great. I mean, I don't want to knock his next two albums, Tonight and Never Let Me Down, but they were a little bit off the mark, to say the least. But that's just, that's life.
Well, that's life. Nobody's perfect. But,
no one.
Sometimes one has to follow the trend, in order to gain more fans, in order to get on the radio. I mean, there are a number of elements about why artists, like a Bowie, because we could talk about Bowie all day, change, because he wasn't going to stay Ziggy Stardust that whole time, but Ziggy had a really good time back then.
Well, absolutely.
The Spiders from Mars were, I mean, one of a kind, and I think because he was so early on well respected, we all stuck with him through and through. And listen, if you ask me, those last two records he made, Black Star and
that's one. Yes, I know. I don't.
Wait a minute.
We're going to get it, aren't we? We are going to find out what that one was, actually.
Hold that thought.
I'm holding it. All I can picture is, oh, yes, David Bowie. This is good. This is quality. This is album Black Star. And before that, I
cannot find that record.
We're not. I keep thinking of Never Let Me Down, but that's the hopeless one, because that was his 80s one.
Oh darn! What was the record before Black Star?
The Next Day. Yeah.
Oh my God! The next day. Oh my God!
Which kind of comes out with that amazing single that we weren't expecting.
What, The Stars Are Out Tonight?
The Stars Are Out Tonight. No, Where Are We Now? Where that strange song.
Okay, so that album goes from The Stars Are Out Tonight, great rock tune, great video with Tilda Swinton. He is back in form, and then later on, as the record keeps getting promoted, Where Are We Now?
Yes.
Oh my God! Where he's reminiscing, and it's pretty sad and very, very beautiful. I love The Next Day. Yes, I'm glad both of our minds came back The Next Day. And, Black Star is really, I think it is a masterpiece, if I may say so. I really do.
Yes, it's a hard one to hear, but it is quite extraordinary.
Totally. And those videos that he made for that album.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
It was very...
what was happening. He knew that he was not long for this planet. And he gave us everything he had to give us.
Yes, and
Yeah.
at the time it's amazing because I think he virtually dies the day after his birthday as well, which I think is kind of
Yes.
strange. It's quite an extraordinary moment, and yeah, I did an interview actually with the his kind of original drummer from Ziggy Stardust, Woody Woodmansey,
Oh my.
and they were playing in New York that night, the last night I suppose he had, and Tony Visconti phones him to wish him a happy birthday, and the crowd
Okay.
wish him a happy birthday,
I was
and
there.
oh my
Yes. I
God.
believe it was the Friday night, and Tony was playing with the band, and he asked us all if we wanted to wish David a happy birthday. Well, everybody starts screaming and hollering, and he calls David and he says that, something, I'm paraphrasing, that,
Yes.
we want to wish you a happy birthday. And all of us just screamed and hollered and wished him happy birthday. And we were so happy. We were so
Yes.
happy. Now, I'm not remembering if it was the next day, or maybe the 10th that he passed away.
But Woody said the next day when he woke up, he went, blimey, my phone's just gone completely bonkers. It couldn't have been that bad a gig last night that they're
Ah,
complaining. And then he listens and he realizes what's happened. But yeah, I mean, I suppose there was also the potential rumor that he might be appearing on stage, I think, as well, which obviously was
well,
never.
people always love to spread that rumor,
We
like Bowie might
always wondered.
show up.
Yes, this is also true.
This is
So
definitely not going to happen.
no, God, that's
But
such.
prior to that, when the play Lazarus was in the East Village, it was extraordinary. First of all, I think I must have went 4 or 5 times, spent all my money. Uh, he did show up once or twice to.
Yes, there's some quite amazing photographs of him,
That is right. Yeah,
and I
still
went
very
to.
handsome.
So I saw it in London, and at the same time, I had a bit of a Bowie moment because I went to also see his Sotheby's auction that he was doing as well, and there was also another little one-man play which was happening in London. So I saw 3 productions related to Bowie that on one day.
And what was the third that you didn't actually mention yet?
I think it's called From Ibiza to the Norfolk Broads. It was a one-man play that somebody had done
About
related
David?
about this person's kind of relationship with Bowie, and it was.
Okay.
And what he meant to him, and it was beautifully done. And like I said, it was a very fringe production, but at the same time, they toured it several times, and I saw it twice.
I love seeing stuff in the fringe.
It was very fringe. You're really close up, and there was one person, like talking about that relationship, which was nice because it wasn't sort of, this is me pretending to be David Bowie. It was me
Sure.
relating to my growing
how
up and
great.
what he meant. But yeah, the Sotheby's exhibition auction was also incredible as well, seeing all his bits and pieces. So just going back to the early 80s. So with the Ritz, you also had, you mentioned Max's, obviously CBGB's. What about things like the Mud Club and Danceteria? Were they
Sure.
part of your world as well?
Yes. Let's go back just for one more moment. That David's birthday was January 8th, and he died on the 10th. I'm looking it up right now.
Right. So yes,
that's it.
That's it. We've got that.
Yes.
I think it's the same day as Elvis Presley, isn't it? As well, his birthday.
Oh, birthday! Oh, wait a minute. Is that Elvis's birthday?
I think they share the same birthday.
Yeah. Oh.
I know, this is good. This is quality chat, actually. People love this.
Yeah, they do. Yes. Yeah. Elvis was born January 8th, 1935. Yes. And as a matter of fact, here we are in August of 2024, and it's Elvis week down at Graceland right now.
And that track, Black Star, references an Elvis song as well, Black Star. When your Black Star is coming, you know your time is over. That was a sort of an Elvis song that David seems to bring in.
Okay, thank you for telling me that.
Have a listen. When we finish, have a little, go to Elvis Presley, Black Star, and then you'll hear his version and what we think is what David's picked up from that little, because Bowie always said his 2 people that he was influenced by was Little Richard, Elvis Presley. So there you go.
Fabulous.
So there you go.
So you asked me a moment ago about Danceteria and the Mud
Um,
Club. I
yes.
wasn't a huge Mud Club person for some reason. I do remember seeing Marianne Faithfull there the night that Broken English, the album, came out on Island Records. She wasn't in great voice, but Marianne Faithfull coming back from like not literally the dead, but she's coming back from the dead. And she had this record that it was the talk of the town, Broken English. So I do remember going there for that. Um, but it wasn't my venue. I went to Danceteria a whole host of times because I was friends with the person who booked the venue, the late great Ruth Polsky, who was just a marvelous woman, very adventurous in her bookings and who she brought over to the United States. But I used to go there all the time, really late at night, up to the top floor, and I would hang out with Alan Vega, and we would be drinking and doing other things until they threw us out at 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I would go to his hotel room, the Gramercy Park, and we would be there all night, chatty Cathy's. And he sometimes made me beautiful pencil drawings. I have a bunch of them. And we stayed friends until he passed away.
Yes. Was
Yeah.
Anne Magnuson part of that scene in Danceteria? Is it Anne?
Yes. For some reason, I wasn't. I mean, I met her a few times, but never became friendly, but for no reason.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what happens, do it's a big thing to sort of start something like the Ritz and think this is
Yes.
my big break, and then after 3 years decide that's enough. What's the reason for
Yeah,
moving on
sure.
at this stage?
I felt like I learned a lot there. I was going out with a young man named Mitchell Krasnow, and he said to me, my dad is leaving Warner Brothers, and he's going to re-up Elektra. As they say, Elektra was in the crapper. Poor thing.
They had taken their eye off the ball, hadn't they?
Ooh, yes. So I said, he said, I think my dad should meet you. Sure. So Bob Krasnow became the chairman of Elektra, and he was going to re-up that label. And Mitchell asked his dad if he would meet with me. Well, I met with Kraz, as we like to call him affectionately, and I had the same conversation with Bob that I had with Jerry Brandt. We talked about music. We talked about all kinds of music, but the little added bonus there was Bob loved art. And at that point in time, artists were flourishing in New York, whether it was Jean Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, Richard Hambleton, Patty Astor had opened up the Fun Gallery at some point in time. And so I talked to Bob about art as well. So he, after the interview, we shook hands and he said, I'll give you a call. And I got a phone call from him about 2 weeks later. And he said, I enjoyed our conversation. And I'm going to give you a job at Elektra. And I was thrilled. He said, you're going to be in the A&R department, and you're going to call Marianne in the HR department, the human resources department, and get set up. I said, oh, Bob, this is incredible. Thank you so much. We hung up. I cried. And then I called a friend and I said, what the heck is A&R? Again, I was laughed at. I soon find out A&R is artist and repertoire. And if you ask me to this day, A&R is the most important part of a record company. You are signing artists, you are making records, and you are crossing your fingers and saying your prayers that the label that you work for knows how to market and promote the music so that you have bestsellers. So and then if you want me to, I could give you my whole life in 60 seconds. I was at Elektra. I was at Geffen.
Just to say on Elektra, were the artists that you were signing in sort of the 84 period, was this, because this was a bit of a funk soul period in there late. There was like Chaka Khan, George Benson, Bootsy, Anita Baker, that we loved the album, Rapture as well, Teddy Pendergast, and Womack and Womack. Was this your period?
Yeah. But all those people like Chaka and George Benson, they were on Warner Brothers proper. And they were in the same building at 75 Rockefeller Plaza. And, WEA, Warner Elektra Atlantic. When Bob got there, it was a funny story because he was on an airplane and there was a young woman sitting next to him and they start talking. And she told him that she was a singer. And he just took an immediate liking to her. And she said, but, I'm on a label already. She says, but I have a record. And I'm not sure she handed him the songstress right then and there, or they had another conversation. In any event, he liked her so much, he signed Anita Baker to Elektra. And she made Rapture for us, one of the most delicious, glorious recordings.
It was slinky, wasn't it? It was silky.
Oh, man, gorgeous. I mean, and then when you think about it, you hadn't heard a voice like that ever or in a while.
Yes.
It's really very sexy.
It was, there was people
very
like
soulful.
In the 70s, there was Millie Ripperton, who was beautiful, but slightly different.
Ripperton.
But then Anita, was it, sorry, what did I say?
Millie. I don't know what you said.
But it was
Minnie Ripperton. But no, it's nothing like Minnie Ripperton, Minnie had that great song, Loving You, and she made great use of how large the octave of her voice was. But Anita was low down and sexy and late night. And that recording, I think her and Michael Powell produced that record. I mean, I don't know how long I listened to that record. I was listening to it when it wasn't even finished. I made Bob give me an unfinished disc, and I would listen to it in my office the whole time. But during that period, when you mentioned Chaka and George, they were on Warner's. Yes, at some point, also very early, Bob signed Teddy Pendergast, and he made some great records for us. Also at that point in time, I don't know, Bob and Seymour Stein were very close. And Bob didn't think that Seymour was really doing The Cure anything. Like, he felt like they were being pushed to the side. And he kind of almost demanded to Seymour to give us The Cure. And I don't know, they logistically, I don't know how they worked that deal out, but, it was all within the family, the corporation. We wound up getting The Cure on Elektra early on, and they made some of their finest records for us.
Yes. Well, that work in the 80s was stunning.
Right. And then I get there in 83. And in 84, I signed Metallica, and I'm now the young, crazy metal kid who works at Elektra, and everybody now is looking for their own Metallica at all the other labels, but that doesn't really happen because that's a once in a lifetime signing. They're imitators, of course, but here we are 40 years later, and they're bigger and more fabulous than ever.
I know, so, that's quite. I mean, so what did you see? Because I loved a bit of heavy metal, the Deep Purple, Black Sabbath in the 70s.
Sure.
And then sort of towards the late 70s, 80s was Motorhead for me. There was a lot of heavy metal which never felt really like Motorhead. But what did you then see in Metallica, which was something else? Because there's a lot of bands that, there was a lot of British rock bands, but they were meat and potatoes, weren't they? There's they're brilliant, but there's not that magic, whereas Ace of Spades magic. So what was Metallica at that
You've
stage?
never heard anything other than Ace of Spades by Motorhead. Bow down to Lemmy, of course. Well, I was friends with a gentleman named Johnny Z. He had a very independent label called Megaforce. He had put out a Metallica record, Kill 'Em All. He put out an Anthrax record. And I believe early on he might have put out a Testament record. We became colleagues fast. And he wanted me. Oh, and he also had a power trio from the UK called Raven, and he wanted me to sign Raven. So we had a discussion about that, and I said, "Listen, I'll give you $5,000. Give me 5 demos of their best songs, and then let's talk about Raven again." But the problem was I heard Kill 'Em All, which sounded like nothing I ever heard before. It was a combination of hard rock and British hard rock and heavy metal, traditional heavy metal, and speed in this melange of
Yes.
sounds. Where did that word just come from? I have no idea. Uh, and they called it Metallica. I mean, it really was unlike anything I had heard before. And then soon, it was nothing like anything anyone ever heard before. So I got to see them. I saw them at the Stone in San Francisco because I had some business to do there, and it blew my mind. They were so charming and charismatic on the stage. I thought the lead singer, and still do, James Hetfield, is an extraordinary performer. He knows how to whip people up into a frenzy. I love the show. I have my business card. I give it to the drummer, Lars Ulrich, when the show is over. And he said, "Well, you do know we're on a label." I said, "Yes, but I want you to be on Elektra. We're gonna take you places." It was like, very manager, agent type, we're gonna take you places, kid. And anyway, so months passed by. I saw them in '83 in San Francisco. In '84, he says, "We're coming to do a triple act bill with Raven and Anthrax at Roseland on 52nd Street. Are you still interested in us?" And I said, "Absolutely." I see them at Roseland that night. They ripped the proverbial roof off the fucking venue. Oh, excuse me, I don't know if I'm.
That's all right. That's fine.
And I was a little drunk. I may have been a lot drunk, and I make my way backstage, and I'm carrying on. I'm hugging everyone and kissing everyone, and they're all looking at me like, "Who is this person, please?" And Lars looks at James and Kirk and Cliff, and they're like, "That's Michael Alago. He's A&R for Elektra." And then they are looking at me like, "You mean this is the guy that we're going to put our lives in his hands?" The answer was yes. So I had them, I think it was the very next day. I had them in the conference room at Elektra. I ordered beer and Chinese food. We laughed our heads off. I gave them all the vinyl that they wanted and cassettes. The Doors, the MC5, the Stooges, whatever rock and roll we had available in '84. And Cliff Burton, a sweetie pie, God rest his soul, he passed in '86. He wanted anything esoteric that we had. So, we were distributing a label called None Such, and they had all that kind of stuff on there. So I gave him vinyl of that. And then, I don't know, as they say, I don't want to just keep going on, but as they say, the rest is history. I signed
Yes.
them, and they became huge. And
Well, very big.
I felt that from the get-go. Honestly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So as the 80s progressed, I mean, it's kind of interesting. You had that kind of the sort of smooth funk sound. Then you had this kind of Metallica, but then also within that there was the kind of the rise of that hair metal with people like Bon Jovi and all those kind of anthemic tracks. How did you navigate that kind of period? Were you
by ignoring them? I was not a fan of all those, as they call them, hair bands. It was a little too popular, pop music, radio friendly for me. I always loved stuff that was sometimes not so friendly, but I loved the arrogance, and I loved the loudness and the energy of stuff that was heavy metal. Like some of these things, I didn't know if Flotsam and Jetsam was ever going to get on the radio, or Metal Church. They did get on college radio and whatever smaller metal stations were out there across the United States. But I never gravitated towards the the hair bands. I loved everything heavy. But
Mm.
now, just so yeah. So, but in all of that, at one point, Bob Krasnow says, called me into his office, and he said, I signed a young woman, and you are now her A&R person. Uh, okay, what's her name? Tracy Chapman. I was like, oh, okay. And he played me a song. And I was like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. He said, well, she's making a record with David Kirschenbaum. Give her a call. Give David Kirschenbaum a call. Call Charles Koppelman at SBK Publishing. That's who, mentioned Tracy to us, and that's why we signed her. So I became part of her team in the middle of that record, really, and I just listened to the album and the mixes and approved things here and there. And at one point, I loved the record so much, and it's
Yes.
so good. I
Well,
mean, really, like
well, that
gorgeous.
sort of that there were certain iconic. I don't know if you had it in the same way, but I know in the UK there's certain albums that everybody seems to buy, even people who are probably off music a bit and they're only going to buy a couple of albums that year. There could be Sade, there could be Phil Collins, Simply Red, the Paul Simon Graceland, Tracy
Joan
Chapman, Susan.
Armatrading.
Pardon?
Joan Armatrading.
Joan Armatrading. Yeah, there was those kind of albums you look in some people's label collection
Yeah,
and they've
sure.
got the classics, haven't they? And
Yes.
Tracy Chapman's just kind of appealed to just everybody at that stage. I mean, it really was quite
Again,
special.
another delicious voice that when you heard her voice on the radio for the first time, you probably got what is that called? Like the the chills. You probably knew that, like, wow, I've never heard anything like this before. It was 1988, and I think it was time again for singer-songwriters to come back. And so I remember we were having a marketing meeting about Tracy, and it was talked about that they were going to release Baby Can I Hold You as a single. Oh, brother. I quietly ran out of the conference room and I went to Kraz. I said, Bob, you have to come into the conference room. They're talking about releasing Baby Can I Hold You. And he said, what the fuck is on everybody's mind? With the $10,000 suit and the cigar. And I said, it's Fast Car. And so he's, be quiet, leave it to me. He comes in, and the chairman comes in and everybody's quiet, nobody's saying anything. And he says, okay, so this week we're talking about the Tracy Chapman album, correct? Yes. He said, well, the single is Fast Car. He walks out, comes back in. If you can't get it on the radio, don't come to work tomorrow. And that's when he walked out. And I was like, oh my God, because I was like a big mouth. But you know what? I knew after living with that record for 6, 8, 9 months that Baby Can I Hold You, as beautiful as it is, this girl was not a singer of love songs. It just so happened that there was something beautiful and loving about a couple of those tracks. But you listen to Fast Car, you listen to Talking About a Revolution, and that she was a bit of a protest singer in her. And it was just incredibly delightful to hear this record at that time, because I don't remember what other recordings were out in the 80s that were singer-songwriter-ish. But what an extraordinary record. And just, if I may, 25 years later, the country artist Luke Combs
Oh, yes.
covers that song. He covers it beautifully. And then, the Grammy Awards were on television. Nobody knew she was going to make an appearance. She really is a very quiet, introspective person, very private person. We haven't seen Tracy in a long time. And she comes walking on stage with that big, beautiful, radiant smile. And Luke Combs is like, I'm sure he doesn't know what to say. And then they start singing Fast Car together. And it was really a delight. Everybody in the audience was screaming and shouting. You could see how happy she was 25 years later.
Yes,
It's out again. And then I don't know, a week later, it's number one on the charts.
absolutely. It's to be honest, I just realised doing the maths, it's nearly 40 years, isn't it?
A
It's,
fast car.
yeah, 38
Well,
years.
88, 11, 12. Yeah. What'd you say? 40?
It's not quite 40, but it will be 30. It's about 38 years ago.
Okay, 88. Maybe what, 35 years ago?
Yeah. The 80s is.
Something like that. Something like that,
So
right?
you got, I
You
know
know,
I got to a point in my life where I started having to use my fingers to count decades back because
I'm
I was
doing
always.
that and I'm writing it down right now. Don't speak to me.
I won't. I know.
Carry over the one, move
Yeah,
that over. 1, 10, 9, 8,
this is
30.
quality.
I could breathe again. 36 years.
36. Right there, you go.
It
So
really is. It's amazing that a lot of the records that perhaps we all love. In October I'm going to be 65, and when I think about it, like, oh my God, Alice Cooper's Killer record is like, I think, 52 years old.
yes, it's
And you know what? There was a re-release of it recently. It was remastered. It was repackaged, and I purchased that for $100 or something. And when I put it on, it was like yesterday, and I felt like a kid in Brooklyn again. And I loved every waking moment of it. Still,
yes.
so right now, yeah,
This is good. Just briefly though, because you had a bit
yes,
of a Johnny Lydon moment, didn't you, before Tracy? Which is also because he has one of those kind of iconic kind of nights, doesn't he, with the band Public Image Limited, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
quite famous. How does that develop? Where was this again? Was this at the Ritz?
Yes, it was the second week in May, 1981. I had Bow Wow Wow for that Friday and Saturday.
Oh, Annabella.
That week, Malcolm McLaren called and he said, "We're not coming." And I'm like, What do you mean you're not coming?" Well, Annabelle is underage and her mother doesn't want her to come to the United States. I said, "Excuse me, 2 weeks ago, she was underage. We booked it. We sent you a 50% deposit. So you really have to just get your ass here and we'll pay for Annabella's mother for the plane ride." And he basically said, "Well, we're not coming." And I just thought, this mother effer.
Yes,
Yes.
quite.
So I had to put on really fast. I had to put on a thinking cap. And I don't remember how I knew this bit of information, but John and Public Image were at Liz Rosenberg's office, like uptown at 75 Rock, marketing and promoting. They were doing a publicity jaunt for the Flowers of Romance. And I thought, I'm going to get them to play here. And Jerry, my boss, was like, "Oh, God, do whatever you need to do. We just need to fill Friday and Saturday night up." So I called Liz's office, and they don't know me from, as they say, Adam. And I start talking to John on the phone, and Keith Levine and Jeanette. And I said, "You don't know me. I booked the Ritz downtown. Are you familiar with the venue?" "Yes, we're very familiar with the venue." And I said, "You got to come and play." They said, well, we're just doing a press junket and we have no instruments." I said, "I'll get you the instruments. Keith, let's program like 45 minutes worth of music into that keyboard. And you know what? Let me just send a car for you." I sent a car for them. They came down. It was like we laughed a lot. And they said they were going to do it. Now, that night, I think they do some bit of a sound check. They're behind the 30-foot white screen. John likes to remind me back then in 81, May of 81, that we're not coming out from behind the screen. And I'm like, "John, you know what? People want to see you." And they were like, "Well, we'll make it work." Oh, brother. Okay. So anyway, we're in the evening now, and the lights go down in the venue, and we hear the track "Flowers of Romance," And what was beautiful almost about it, probably I was the only one who thought it was beautiful, but there's the white screen, and from the back of the hall, we had all these lights facing that screen. So all you saw of them were like dancing silhouettes. It really did look cool. But, typical of Lydon, he's taunting and teasing the audience. He's sticking his head out from behind the screen, saying, we're never coming out from behind the screen. Oh, Lordy. So about a good 18 minutes in, as the song kept going on, it was like an extended version. People are yelling and screaming, and they're now throwing beer bottles because they want to see rock. They want to hear rock and roll. They don't want a performance. They don't want a performance art piece, which is what this was turning into. Chairs were getting thrown from the balcony. Everyone was freaking out. It's 1981, and our staff doesn't know how to deal with adventurous crowds, punk rock. And so after about 18 minutes or 20 minutes or so, the music was shut down. And, we were asking people to leave the venue. And I believe they could get their money back if they wanted to. I had a good laugh about it. But my boss, Jerry Brandt, was not smiling at all because the very expensive, the very expensive 30-foot screen. Oh, my brain once again stopped. This is what happens when I get excited. It was getting ripped. It was torn, and it was like, oh my God, this is an expensive screen. Anyway, so I go backstage, and I let a kid backstage who was a big fan of John's because he got his head all bloodied, and the kid was, this young kid was in heaven that he was meeting John Lydon, and we were all back there laughing and hooting and hollering and doing the champagne and the other stuff. And I go to work the next day, and Jerry says, well, that was something. I said, let's bring him back again. He was like, don't even go there. Don't even go there. So, I don't think we had any artists the next night. It was just a DJ. And whoever showed up the Saturday night showed up the Saturday night. But I got to tell you, from 1981, and I was helpful in signing John to Elektra Records, and that's when they made Album, that generic record, with Bill Laswell. Extraordinary record.
Absolutely. God, that was a classic. Talking of Bill yes, dear old John.
I was just going to say, John, still. During that time period, I don't think Virgin was going to release Live in Tokyo, and this is what you want, this is what you get. So I the power to talk to the powers that be, and we picked up those two records for North America. It was a very expensive deal, all in all. And after that, the album recording, we didn't go on anymore with John, but I cemented a friendship with him up to like right now. So 43 years later, we've never had a bad word with each other. He's so brilliant. I love him so much. And I haven't talked to him in a couple of months since his wife Nora passed away this year. His wife almost to 45 years. And right after Nora passed away, his manager passed away as well.
Rambo.
What?
Is his name Rambo? Was his manager?
Oh my God, Rambo Stevens. Hi, another character. But God be with him. He's somewhere out there in the universe, in heaven, or whatever it is that you believe in. But yeah, right back to back, they both passed away, and John really was a mess. He wasn't picking up the phone for anybody. I left him a few voice messages, and he would either email me or text me, and it was all maybe 2 words each time until he got out of that funk. Heavy, dude. That's heavy stuff,
It's very heavy. That's never easy to.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Especially, and he was faithful to her for all those years.
Yes, my God, that was one amazing relationship,
Beautiful
actually.
story. Yes.
It is an
Anyway,
amazing story,
sorry to,
and
I
and
think
that whole business with Ari Up from the Slits as well, which
her daughter, yes, at some point during all that, she passes away from cancer.
yes, blimey,
Mhm.
and looking after the child and all that business as well, which was a lot of
That's right.
responsibility.
The two kids.
Yeah, that was quite something. But
Yes.
as the 80s progressed, okay, so I was a very indie pop kid during the 80s. I loved the Smiths, I loved Morrissey, all that kind of stuff. The indie pop sort of really comes alive. There's people like, I don't know, the Sonic Youth, Butthole Surfers, Big Black, Husker Du, all these kind of bands I absolutely adore. And the Swans appear. Do the Swans appear in your life as well as another classic John Peel? Because I love this guy called John Peel, who's a DJ.
Of course.
Scraping fetus off the wheel. So these are great artists, aren't they, of our time?
Well, I think so. Two things. I'm just going to give you a little like rundown of the labels I was at. I was at Elektra. I was at Geffen. I was at Elektra. I was at Geffen. Then I was at a little label that was also revamped called Uni. It was popular in the 60s and 70s. I think maybe uh, Neil Diamond might have even been on Uni. Anyway, it gets revamped. And then I also go to Chris Blackwell, who owned Island
Island.
Records. Yeah, I go to his label, Palm Pictures, which was half independent feature films and half record company. Backwards, one more moment. I am at, for just a moment, because Uni didn't last long. I decide that I want to sign Swans and I want to make the most beautiful, quiet recording with them. Oh boy. Yeah. So we did. Bill Laswell produced the record. It really is a hauntingly beautiful record called The Burning World. I had Robert Mapplethorpe. I didn't have him shoot the cover. There was a picture of a yellow calla lily that I just loved, and I felt like it fit with the recording. So I presented the visual to Michael Girard. He said, "Oh yeah, let's do it." And so that it's just a big calla lily and very small type that says "Swans: The Burning World." In the end, Michael was not happy with it because Bill Laswell took total control of the record. I love the record. It's unlike any of the other Swans records. If you are familiar with them, or if you're a fan of theirs, I mean, they were also they're artists that if you go to see them, if the
They loved to put the volume up, didn't they?
they loved, yeah. If they would play, like if all artists play on 10, they found a way to play on 12. And for all my years, and now I'm in my 60s, I never used earplugs. Never. I got tinnitus in this ear years ago when I was holding on to the stage for the Plasmatics at Bonds on Times Square, and my hearing was never the same. Did I care? No. Fast forward again. So I make this record with Swans, and it's a really beautiful recording, and not really a lot happens with it. Uni doesn't survive. At Uni, we also signed Transvision Vamp,
Wendy. Yes.
Wendy James, and Steve Earle, the
Perfect.
fabulous Steve Earle. He made a record for us called Copperhead Road.
Brilliant.
Awesome recording. And so those were the three artists that were on Uni. And
God. Because I got the Burning World, and I thought it was on MCA, or was that just in the UK?
Oh no, well, no, MCA and distributed through, I think it was distributed through
Yeah. I must admit,
MCA or Universal,
I
but
was
it was on Uni.
Yeah, so I was
Uh,
pleasantly surprised with Burning World. I just loved a lot of the songs. I loved "Goddamn the Sun," "Saved,"
let it come down.
and Mary Jane, "Cry One More Tear." That is a classic, isn't it? The lyrics and everything. It's just, it's so melodramatic, but I loved it.
Absolutely gorgeous. And also, I'm very good friends with Michael Girard, and I never miss a Swans performance in New York. And like I said, if the sound system was on 10, they figured out how to put it on 12. And last year was the first time I used earplugs.
Yes, this happened. No, because I've done a couple of interviews with Jarbo, and it's a fascinating artist. But she was just saying there was a lot of tension in the studio during that recording between Michael and Bill, and things just weren't happy place at all. And I think before that they had used, was it Martin BC, his studio, BC Studios in New
Oh,
York.
Martin. Well, are you saying that Swans used Martin prior to that?
I thought they did. I thought they might have used
Did they
because
use Martin for that other project, The World of Skin?
probably
Perhaps?
because there's an amazing film about Martin BC Studios, and they
Really?
all check it out.
Well, who's used The World of Skin?
Oh,
Oh,
the Swans.
we love them.
We do love them a lot,
Oh,
actually.
like totally. I have so much love and respect for Michael Jura. Let's see, darling. It's not saying in The World of Skin who produced. Ah, well, it says Michael Jura.
I just wondered what studio they might have used, really.
Okay, hold that thought, please.
I know this is like pop quiz, isn't it? Yeah,
It
do try
totally
and
is.
if you go to Martin's website, Martin BC, he'll be able
Okay.
to stream the film
Oh, okay.
and sort of, you can never get enough rock documentaries in our lives.
Oh,
I know, this is great. This is quality, this is.
absolutely. Yeah, Martin is known for recording records by Sonic Youth, Swans, John Zorn, Bill Laswell, Material, the Dresden Dolls, Cop Shoot Cop. I think Martin even worked on a very early White Zombie record. But
Yes, it's
I will look for the Martin documentary. Now, I'm just gonna say this. I hope. Do you do editing when you?
I can do. I do sometimes, yes.
Well, listen. I think I've been all over the place in this interview. It's already 5:15. I could probably go on forever. We never spoke about my darling Nina Simone.
No, we haven't actually, have we?
Oh, and you know what? I'm just saying, you might have to do a little cut and paste
Yes.
so that I don't come off like a bird brain.
No, it's quality. I know, but before that, Thirlwell, the fetus.
I became friends with Jim very fast in New York. I loved, well, he had all those names. Scraping fetus off the wheel. You've got fetus on your breath. Uh, Fetus uberalis. Uh, what else? What else? What else?
I know he Thirlwell.
All
Yeah,
very.
so how did you get to meet Mr. Thirlwell?
I don't remember. It could be because we met at Swan's gigs. To be honest, because I have half of a brain left, so sometimes I really don't remember a lot. Except that I did meet Jim Thirlwell a very long time ago, when we were both picking each other up off the floor, drunk. But I just loved him. I loved those recordings that he made. Wait. Fetus uberalis, you've got fetus on your breath, scraping fetus off the wheel. I'm sure there were more of those configurations of fetus. So to be honest, I don't remember. I love Jim. I still see him at shows these days. And I don't know if that was the question that you asked me.
No, but did you work with him that
Oh,
much?
sorry, that much? No, he produced a demo for me of White Zombie, and it's fabulous. But here we go again. Egos. Rob Zombie, Jim Thirlwell. It was more Rob Zombie. It was like it wasn't to Rob's liking the demo, and I just thought, you know what, I'm not going to argue with these two because it's nothing will ever become of it. So he just made these demos for me, and they might be roaming around somewhere. I'm not sure if those demos are in the White Zombie box set or not, or not.
Yes.
But that was the only time that I professionally worked with Jim, who I adore. He's a lovely character, and he's always working.
Yes, absolutely. He's always got a project. So then, yes, we creep into the 90s after the sort of excitement of the 80s, and you work with Nina Simone. So quite another change here, isn't there?
Yes. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Late 80s, early 90s, I'm drinking a lot and doing
Yes.
lots of drugs, and I acquire HIV. And if that's not enough, I wound up going to rehab, and
Was that your choice going to rehab?
hell no. The powers that be at Elektra were like, too many people are talking about you. You can't be representing Elektra going out every night in this condition. Damn it. Damn it. So I go to rehab. I think it was Christmas of 92, maybe a little before Christmas, but December of 92. And there you have it. Prior to that, I always loved Nina Simone. My father's sister, my Aunt Jenny, used to listen to like, Isaac Hayes and Nancy Wilson and Nina Simone. I was always fascinated with that voice. Once again, it was a voice that didn't sound like anyone else. So
Yeah.
here we are fast forwarding to 1983. She hasn't played New York since like forever. And they turned Irving Plaza into Swing Plaza for the 2 nights, 4 shows that she was doing there. So I thought to myself, honey, I'm going to see Nina Simone. And so I find her brother, Sam Wayman. I find his phone number. I give him a call. I tell him I work for Elektra Records. I'm an A&R man, and I love your sister. So he said, well, would you like to come down in the afternoon to say hello? Oh, my God. Honey, I was shaking in my pants. So I go down in the afternoon. I'm standing at the back of the venue, and she's at the piano doing her sound check. And she's looking, and she's like, who's that? What do you want? This ain't no sideshow. This ain't no freak show. Come. And I'm like, gonna pass out or something.
Yes.
And Sam said, this is the A&R man from Elektra. Again, somebody laughs in my face. I have this history of people laughing in my face, but in the end, great relationships have formed from it. And she looked at me and she said, you're an A&R man from Elektra? How old are you? And I was like, I don't know. I'm like 26 years old. And she laughed and she laughed. And then I just said to her, I love you so much. She said, come, meaning come up to the stage. She scoots over on her piano seat, and I sit there with her. And I'm in absolute heaven that I'm sitting with Nina Simone. She said, would you like some of my herbal tea? And I said, sure. Little does she tell me that it's there is so much cayenne pepper in this herbal tea that I thought I was going to drop dead. And she laughed. I guess you're not used to this kind of tea. That's my tea. All right, great, whatever. I see those 4 shows. I go back to Elektra. Krasnow's like, she's tired. She's a pain in the ass. We're not signing her. I'm furious. So it's at that point in time when I leave Elektra, I go to Geffen, I come back to Elektra, fresh from rehab, and I said, Bob, I have to sign Nina Simone. And now he's like, wants me to just shut up about the whole thing. So, again, I call her brother Sam, and I go out to her apartment on Franklin Avenue in Hollywood, and we sit and we talk about music. Another artiste talking about music. And she wants to make a record about love and loneliness and loss. And we both had lost our fathers at some point in time. So we talked a lot about our fathers. We both loved Billie Holiday's Lady in Satin and Frank Sinatra's A Man Alone. Two very distinct records. At that point in time, Billie Holiday's voice was shot, but it was Billie Holiday with the Ray Ellis Orchestra. It was on Columbia. It was an exquisite recording. And then there's Frank Sinatra making this record of Rod McEwen poems. Rod McEwen, gay poet from the 70s, Frank Sinatra. Who would have thunk it?
No.
Anyway, it's awesome. It's an acquired taste record, but Frank Sinatra's A Man Alone is love it. So we gravitated towards those two records because we loved them so much. And so we decided that let's pull a couple of songs off Frank's record and make this record with Nina.
Yeah.
So, we pulled, over a dozen or so songs. We covered 3 Rod McEwen songs, and then we recorded La Me Quitte Pas by Jacques Brel, The Folks Who Live on the Hill. It's a great record. I executive produced it. I put all the songs together, and then I hired Andre Fisher. Andre Fisher back then was the drummer for Rufus.
Right. Rufus.
And at that point in time, he was married to Natalie Cole. And so Natalie would visit the studio all the time. And that kind of thrilled Nina because, Nina loved her father, Nat Cole. And what a beauty. What a great beauty. And, then another exquisite voice. Anyway, so I made this record with Nina called A Single Woman with a 50-piece orchestra. And we put it out. She refused to do any press for me. I think the two things that she did, I got a huge New York Times article out of it, and a Late Night with Jay Leno, which was a nightmare, but that was a behind-the-scenes nightmare. But, I stayed friends with Nina until the day she passed in April of 2003. We loved each other. I would go see her all over the world. I write about her in a big way in my memoir, I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Signing Metallica, Beating Death. And just one little tidbit, I don't know if we're going to stop right here, but Nick Cave from the Birthday Party was promoting a series of concerts called the Meltdown Series.
Yes.
So this was 1999. Everyone played there. One night it was Suicide. One night it was Nick Cave. One night it was Elvis Costello. And one evening it was Nina Simone. She was so spot on that night. It was really kind of unbelievable. Like she pulled herself up from wherever and she socked it to you. She gave it to you with such deliciousness, such splendor. So, when she was on, Nina, it was amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So then,
yes, please.
Just briefly then, how do you navigate the next section? This is the kind of the great post-grunge period of the 90s, isn't it? Where we have those kind of heavy bands like Soundgarden, Soul Asylum, Marilyn Manson. This is where people like Jimmy Iovine suddenly sort of spring up and is kind of on the scene and is kind of in a big way. So how do you then keep it?
Interscope Records. I'm going to backtrack just for your listeners if you decide you're going to keep this in. So that evening at the Meltdown, so much happened that we don't have to get into, except that that day, I went to her hotel with a bottle of champagne, 2 dozen white roses, and she was getting her hair cornrowed. She threw everybody out of her suite and she said, "Let's take a bubble bath." I was a little shocked. So she just stripped down, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? So I stripped down just to my boxer shorts because I was a little petrified. And she said that they're bubbles. I had to call the chemist and the concierge downstairs in the hotel, and they gave us bubbles because she wanted a bubble bath. So we took a bubble bath. We laughed like we were 14-year-old kids. And July of 1999 was the last time I saw her. Fast forward, I'm going to my dad's grave in April of 2003. Something says, call Nina. Okay, I come back up to my apartment. I put down everything that I had in my hands, the plant, the this, the that. I was going to clean up the grave at my dad's at the cemetery. And I call Aix-en-Provence. And the housekeeper said, "Oh, Mr. Alago, Dr. Simone is not well." I said, "I know all that. Can you put her on the phone for a few minutes?" "Hello, my darling. Oh, sugar lips. Why didn't you ever marry me? I know you're gay and everything." I said, "Nina, all this time we have made better friends." And David, I'll have to get you a copy of my memoir because I think it's the longest chapter in the book is about Nina Simone. Never mind Metallica or anybody else or my 25 years in the business. It was about Nina Simone. In any event, so we talk for a bit of time, and the housekeeper says, she really can't stay. I said, "It's okay." I said, "Nina, I love you." She says, "I love you." I go to my father's grave that day. I come home. For some reason, I don't shut the computer off. And I never have CNN on the computer, but there you go. I wake up, I look at the computer, I see CNN, and it says Nina Simone dead at 70. My heart broke into a million pieces. I was not able to listen to her music for the next few years. And then I thought to myself, you love her so much. Start filling the air again with her music. So believe it or not, that's the shortened version of a Nina Simone story coming out of my mouth. I know you want to fast forward now.
No, well, I mean, I didn't realize there was going to be that moment. Yeah, that's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is extraordinary. Oh, I loved her so much. I really did. I loved her so much. And there are all these details that you'll read about in the book.
Yes.
Carrying a gun to the Beacon Theater. She always wanted to shoot people. One night at Aix-en-Provence, I used to get all the New York newspapers. So I was looking in this trashy newspaper called the New York Post, and in the corner they had a page 6. It was like, ooh, page 6, and it said "Diva's house on fire." I'm paraphrasing, and I'm like, oh my God. So I called the south of France. And again, the housekeeper said, "Oh, she doesn't want to talk to you. She said you set the house on fire." I said, "Excuse me, I'm in New York at 75 Rockefeller Plaza. You're in the south of France, and I set the house on fire." "Yes," she said, "to tell you you did." I said, "Okay, please just tell me the real story." Well, she'd been taking her medications with alcohol. The linen closet was underneath the staircase. The bedroom was on the second floor, and she dropped her cigarettes on the linen on the carpeting going up to her bedroom, and it set the place on fire. But at first, she says to me, "You know what? the place went on fire because you sent me too many faxes. I said, faxes? She said, I'm not a white man. Don't send me faxes. I said, you know what? I was sending you faxes because I wanted you to sign a piece of paper that would give you the back end of your advance. And she said, oh, my darling, I can't wait. And she got like, she always got like that with me. Sugar lips, darling, all that. Because she knows I fall for it each and every time. So that night also, she said, and you know what? I'm in my bed and I hear somebody coming up in a ladder. I said, oh, it's probably a fireman coming to save you. She said, well, you know, I had a pistol under my pillow because I turned killer a long time ago. And I said, okay. And she said, there was this black man who came into my bedroom because, you know, he wanted to fuck me. I said, Nina, he didn't want to fuck you. He wanted to save your life because you couldn't go down the stairs. She says, what do you know? You're gay and every black man wants to fuck, every man wants to fuck a black woman. I said, okay, you know what? I'm glad you're safe. And I'll speak to you again soon. So those were always the things. Nothing was ever easy. There were all these huge, convoluted problems all the time. But I ate it up. I adored every waking moment of it. She is my all-time favorite artist. And if I had to go to, like, you know, when they say you're going to a desert island and what are your faves, I would only bring Nina Simone records with me.
Amazing. Yes. Well, that's yes, just to remember those intense moments. My God, that's quite
Fabulous.
Fabulous indeed.
Fabulous, intense, crazy, heartbreaking. I mean, it was, you know, all those adjectives. But I think you wanted to fast forward here because I'm going on for too long.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, so then the next little chapter, you've got this album out. The 90s, musically, things are changing. Up to 99, we have, you know, the great Woodstock 99, where everything's a bit heavy and rock and rap and terrible. So how do you navigate your love for music and keeping it together after all your health issues?
Sure,
HIV, drugs, rehab.
I almost died once. I mean, at one point I had full-blown AIDS, and when there was no medication, I had something called wasting syndrome, where I was just wasting away, literally wasting away. I was a toothpick, and I had an incredible doctor. There was no medications at the time. She gave me vitamin IV drips and something called pentamidine, so that would strengthen my lungs because my immune system was totally shot. Well, fast forward, something came into the marketplace called sequinavir. She said, there's something else called AZT. I don't want you to take it. I said, Barbara, you're my primary care doctor. If you tell me not to take AZT, I'm not taking it. Well, every gay man that I knew in and out of the music business, they died from AZT. In any event, I know now, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place, but I got sick for a long time. About a year and a half later, I was back to work again, and I never got sick like that again, thank God. So let's fast forward a little bit. It's the 90s, and the second time I'm leaving Geffen, and Chris Blackwell's office calls, and they know about my music history and the artist. Oh, well, and we're backtracking one more time, because while I was at Geffen, the second time I signed White Zombie, and that first album, La Sexorcista, Devil Music Volume 1, becomes a huge million seller. But I won't get into the long, convoluted story. Fast forward. I don't remember how long I was at Geffen, but Chris Blackwell calls, and from 2000 till 2004, I do A&R at Palm Pictures. I work with a duo from Chicago called Local H that I had Jack Douglas produce. I also signed a sweet little heavy metal group. I'm still friends with these people, called Speed Dealer. I had the bass player from Metallica, Jason Newsted, produce their record. And I also signed a group called Fozzy. And Fozzy is led by the professional wrestler, Chris Jericho. Now, those were the 3 records that I made at Palm Pictures. Palm and Chris could have cared less about rock and roll. They allowed me to do what I wanted to do there. And at that point in time, I felt like I was getting ill again. And I just thought, you know what? I've done this for 25 years now. I am done. So sometime in 2004 ish, I just left. I left on disability, and I hadn't officially worked in the music business again. But in 2000, and I think it was 2008, Cyndi Lauper calls, and we were friends. And I know I'm going out of order with your interview, and you probably want to just hang up.
No, that's absolutely fine. No, good old
Okay.
Cyndi.
Good, fabulous. She says, Michael, I know you know how to make a Metallica record, but can you help me? I'm making a dance record. I'm calling it Bring It to the Brink. I helped her with that record. I helped pick songs. We talked about producers from overseas, blah, blah, blah. I was just involved a wee bit. And she made it at I believe she made it at her home in Stamford, Connecticut. Okay. Great. Love Cyndi. Loved being involved with her. She really is an icon. She's amazing. 2009, 2010, she calls me up again and says, in that voice of hers, that Brooklyn Queens voice, Michael, I know you had to make those heavy records. I want to make a blues record. Let's make a blues record. So I went up to her apartment on the Upper West Side, and we start listening to all types of blues recordings. She had a bunch of blues box sets. There were artists that we were both very fond of, whether it was, B.B. King, Albert King, Ann Peebles. There was so many people that we referenced for this record. We sat in her, and I'm big on Chinese food as well. So we sat in her kitchen for, I don't know, what seemed like months, and we put together a blues record. So then a friend of mine, Josh, who had a little label called, I'll remember in a moment, he had suggested someone named Scott Bomar, young guy, probably in his early 40s. I went down with Cyndi to meet Scott Bomar. We took a shine to him immediately. He produced her album, Memphis Blues. It's a great, great recording. Who would have thunk that Cyndi could do the blues? And she does it beautifully. We got nominated for a Grammy, which was extraordinary in itself, for Best Contemporary Blues Recording. We didn't win, but when you don't win, we all say, well, it's just nice to be nominated. Well, yes, indeed, it is nice to be nominated because what it said was, you did good work.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you've got to be in it to win it, and
correct.
And
those are my 2 little Cyndi Lauper stories.
Yes, because I did an interview with a producer, Mark Saunders, who did, I think, Sisters of Avalon, actually. And
oh, that's a good record.
Yes, I think they recorded it possibly in Spain, I seem to remember. Or, I don't know,
I have no idea.
But yes, that was quite something. So after Cyndi, that must have sort of given you a little bit of another lift boost. And a little bit of a boost.
It did. Yes, it did give me a boost. I'm terrible with time because of my scatterbrain. But a couple of years ago, there's a band called Ether Coven, very heavy metal band from Fort Lauderdale, South Florida. And I totally fell in love with them because it was so heavy. It was so different. And I just loved them. So I wound up getting them a one-off deal with Century Media Records up here in New York. Unfortunately, their singer, Pete, got cancer and he passed away. But they have about 3, maybe 4 recordings out, Ether Coven. So if you like your music, I can't even speak anymore. If you like your music very heavy, then they're the band for you. We can fast forward just a little more because now
Yes.
it gets even heavier. There are these young people from somewhere out in New Jersey that I'm told about, but I also meet them because there's a podcast called the Metallica Cave podcast. And they were playing at the podcast, which is in somebody's basement in New Jersey. And I decide I'm going. So Jerry Declet, the guy who runs the Metallica Cave, he's so dedicated to Metallica that it's insane, and he's fabulous. And he said, I think you're going to love these young people called Morbid Cross. Believe it or not, Morbid Cross. And I thought, okay, so they're young in their 20s, and then you know what? They're thrash metal. They're fabulous. They're fabulous. Fast forward, I'm going to see them tomorrow night in New Jersey at Dingbats, and I'm kind of managing them right now. So my life, I am a person who does not know how to not. Is that a double negative? Wait a minute. I don't know how to not be busy. So, whether we didn't even touch upon in 2017, a documentary came out about me called Who the F Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago, which right this minute in 2024, it's on Amazon Prime and 4 other popular platforms. In 2020, my memoir came out. We'll fast forward some more. I'm looking after Morbid Cross. I adore them, and I'm trying to get them a record deal. We just finished a 4-song demo. It's really terrific, but you got to love that heavy duty, non-radio friendly music, which is, as they say, it's heavy music to my ears. And they're lovely people, and you only want to work with good people anyway. So I'm going to look to get them a record deal this year. And I think you're up to date with me at the moment. You could continue asking me to talk about anything else, but I can tell already, at 5:43, we've been on for an hour and 45 minutes. I'm going to beg you to cut and paste where you need to.
Yes.
Just so that, just so that it becomes concise.
It's
I'm not like blabbering. And so that if I'm like thumfering somewhere, get rid of it.
It's quality, yes. Well, but look, Michael, this has been amazing. It's just, well, actually, I think that's, because your life has been so, it's not completely straight, is it? So it's kind of,
so to speak. No,
it's an understatement, I guess. Yeah, but at the same time, it's just fantastic, and it kind of captures the essence of your incredible life. And but it also sounds like you're still out there in the clubs, hitting these amazing bands, which I have to say is Morbid Cross tomorrow night. Take your earplugs.
Well, I'm not, but everybody else listening can. Yeah, I never stopped loving music, even when I stopped working officially in the business. I love music. It's my it's my everything.
That's it. That's it. I mean, obviously the last 2 bands that we talked about were very metal. Is that where you kind of naturally gravitate, though, which is quite different to your love of your Desert Island Discs with Nina Simone?
Correct. Yes. Well, it might change, but yes, if somebody said you're on a desert island, what do you want to hear? I would hear Nina Simone because she's my all-time favorite artist, and she's so she was so delicious, and she was a dear friend of mine. But yes, I love the heavier sounds in contemporary heavy metal. I just love what it does to my head, which is I can't even explain it.
Yes.
So we might have to delete that. I love heavy metal. I love what it does to my head. I love I know it just takes me elsewhere. But yes, on an off night when I'm not going out to a heavy metal bar, I have, the Hissing of Summer Lawns by Joni Mitchell on the turntable, vinyl. because I've been collecting vinyl more than ever now. From Joe Stafford and Tony Bennett to my girl, Joni Mitchell. And of course, now I have every bit of vinyl of Laura Nyro. And I love that Laura Nyro record, Gonna Take a Miracle, where LaBelle is backing her up for the recording.
Oh, Patti LaBelle. Yes, I know. That's quite an amazing story, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another classic. Look, well, Michael, this has been just so special and so much. It's been, but your health generally is good. This is it.
Yes.
Apart from your
Yes. Thank you for asking. My health is in great shape. I take one pill a day called Biktarvy. It's a state-of-the-art HIV pill. And, I get my blood work done every 6 months to a year. I took my bloods last month in July, and my viral load is at 0. Non-detectable. That went from late 80s, early 90s, almost diminishing to like 60, 70 pounds, to never getting that ill again, to living with HIV.
That's a miracle, isn't it?
It's a miracle. It's a blessing. And like I said, it's at a level where it's a 0. It's non-detectable. You don't lose having HIV because there isn't like this absolute cure, but I can live with HIV when I'm this healthy.
Fantastic. And you look stunning.
Oh, thank you so much.
So healthy. This is all good. And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. As you probably gather, we were just about to wrap up there. Nice to, as you gathered from the last hour and a bit, we went here, there and everywhere, but it keeps it real. A massive thank you to Michael for giving me the time for that interview. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. So if you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived. Aren't you lucky? You can find those on Spotify, iTunes and Podbean, and probably a few others. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.